Well, check it out, y'all. We got what you need. We're all living in apartments, condos, vans. Well, dude, even you can have a studio in a box. Yes, we can help you with that right here at Blind Knowledge. We work on your budget and we figure out your measurements. We'll get you the best sound for the best price. Let me know, 877-237-1143 or at blindknowledge.com. Yep.
Spectres all around me, living in dark, blazing the dark. One by one, pictures gather round me. Where those moonflowers used to lost no more. Spectres gather round here, living in dark, blazing the dark. Night by night, stare into the black where moonflowers used to grow.
Welcome to Paranormal, the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Are we going to do it today? Probably not. But you know what? The world isn't supposed to be normal, and that's why all that matters. So let's keep it strange, folks, and let's continue with our guest today, who I am very excited to have on. The first time we're talking about this topic, and I think it's going to be fun. My guest today is Ray Crist, founder of the Jaguar Path School of Shamanism. And I am very happy to have him on because we have never had a shaman on the show before, I don't believe, and we never talked about it. So it's going to be a fun topic. First things first, though. How you doing today, Ray?
I'm really good, Jeremy. Thank you for having me over. I'm honored.
I am very proud to have you here. And I'm going to start with the first question I ask everybody that comes on this show. What brought you to this path of spirituality that you're on? What started it all?
Okay. I guess we're taking a deep dive right off the bat. I'll tell you, Jeremy, in 2003, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in my kidneys that moved to my lungs, my liver. And I was essentially given a very grim image, or I essentially was given 3 months to live. I was forced to look out of the box. I was forced to look out of the normal. Western medicine, they literally put their hands up and said, well, there's nothing we could do for you. So that pushed me into a huge search. First of all, I want to say, without any drama about it, of course, I went through from one breakdown to another. Anyone that's been given a diagnosis or has had any close call with death, you realize there's just huge realizations that happen. And I want to say, namely, that first of all is you really immediately kind of like start putting together or changing the places of what's essential, what's important. Changing what is of value. And this basically, I came to many realizations of things that I was doing that weren't really necessary in my life. But I also, more important to our conversation, is like I decided that I was going to take my backpack and start traveling the world. When I was young, when I was 16 and on, I was given the books of Carlos Castaneda, who was talking about his apprenticeship with a shaman by the name of Don Juan Matus in Mexico. So I read all his books till 1984, the time that Carlos Castaneda, the author, died. He wrote 14 books, and it was all on his conversations with a shaman and what it means to be a shaman. Just awesome books that really had influenced me on one hand. And on the other hand, by the time I was 18, 19, I got my first motorcycle. I got my first camera. I went down in the path of a career in photography that really took off very fast. By the time I was 23, 24, I already owned a studio and I made a name for myself. So anything metaphysical or paranormal had disappeared in light of the norm that just sucked me in, again, namely being a career and being a little bit dazzled by the lights of Vogue and advertisement and all that. I don't regret that career, but I also know that 20 years into that, by 2003, as I mentioned earlier, that kind of stress and the kind of life that I lived drove me to cancer. So I took a backpack and I decided to start traveling. And I decided I would pick up every stone and see if I could find any miracle workers, any healers, anyone under any name that could say, you know what, no, I can heal you, I can help you. And that's what I did. I let go of everything that I had. A line from one of the books of Carlos Castaneda popped up in my head within a month that I was diagnosed, and it just came up like this amazing head memories that become. It's like Google brings up results. It's like this line came up, and where Don Juan was telling Carlos Castaneda, when death knocks on your door, change your address. And I realized that I needed a serious change of address. So again, sold everything, gave away things that I didn't sell, got a backpack, and flew out of Greece, which was the place I was living at the time. And it's funny, it's good timing, because only now, 20 years later, I have just returned back, not to the life that I was living, but I've just returned back to this country. I want to fast forward and making sure that everything is in the light of truth. I did I went to Johns Hopkins, and I did more tests there. There too, they gave me a grim picture. There too, they told me the best thing I could do is take care of my affairs. But they also linked me up with the National Institute of Health, where in 2005, in January of 2005, I had one surgery. In theory, it would be the first of many surgeries, but also they were making sure that they were not giving me too much hope to ride on, because it just didn't look possible to them that I could survive that. But I know now, looking back, that the fact that I did that surgery was really, really important. And it's a big main reason I'm still alive here today. At the same time, I know it very well, equally well, that, after the surgery, while I had traveled previously to Mexico, after the surgery, I traveled to Peru. And there is where I found shamans where I really linked, I really jived with, I really felt that I trusted, I really understood and opened, and I had an awesome relationship, and I started apprenticing with them. And I know, looking back, if it wasn't for my major change of address, which was not only to leave Greece and be in the United States or Mexico, Peru, the change of address was changing who I was. My address, our address is, if you want, I call it now an endocrine ID, an endocrine identity. It's like, where do you live every day? And do we live in happiness and anxiety and sadness? And what's your surrounding? The surrounding, along with our work, our close personal relationships, all those establish an endocrine patterns of what hormones we secrete, what's the chemistry in our body. And the endocrine identity I had previous to that was one that was acidic, that was one that drove me to cancer. But working with the shamans changed that totally. In other words, if I had done the surgery and went back to home, quote unquote, or went back to myself, quote unquote, my same address, I would find the same place, the same home, a home of someone that had cancer and would be dying soon after. So both really assisted me in this big shift. And coming more to, if you want, in that and the paranormal, the metaphysical, or what I meant, that all really started in Peru when I started working with the shamans. I'll say this and give it to you for any questions and guiding this or making sure I'm focused on what you want and what your audience would like to know more about. Is I was on my knees. I had two circumstances with two different shamans where I found myself on my knees, and one is a name named Don Francisco Flores, who is a elder from the Quero Nations people from the high Andes. And I was on my knees and I said, Don Francisco, please save me. I have cancer. I'm dying. I have a 2-year-old boy back home that I want to father. I want him to have a father. And he looked down at me and he said, you know what? I can't heal you, but I can train you to become a shaman, and then you could heal yourself. And that was one of the biggest shifts that ever happened. And it was the moment of change. It was the moment that I did change my address. I did change my endocrine identity. I lined up with more of who I truly was, and what I knew from reading the books since I was 16, that I come here. This life for me is a life to explore the metaphysical, explore the what's not seen, what's in the other side, what the shamans do.
Well, first things first, I just want to say that story is amazing. And of course, I myself am truly sorry for all the horrible illness you had. And cancer is not a fun thing, as everybody knows. It's one of the worst things that can happen to you in your life. And to overcome it like you did is one hell of a heroic story in a way. And the fact that you were willing to not just depend on these doctors that are paid by insurance companies to not say, oh, we might be able to help you, but yeah, you can't afford it. But I mean, it's just there are. I have a thing on this show against big pharma. It's just kind of my thing. But I mean, there are other ways out there to heal yourself in this world, as I've been told multiple times in this show, and my audience should know by now. I mean, the fact that you're willing to leave your life to just go do something different to try to find another way, that right there to me is a heroic passion for your own life. Because it's just, a lot of people would just give up and say, okay, I'm done. Nothing else I can do at this point, which you refuse to accept that. And that's amazing. That truly is amazing. Because I don't even know if I'd have that strength. I don't know if I would. I mean, I have kids, so maybe it would push me to have the strength, but I don't know if I would. It's just not something you know till you're in that moment. Everybody would say, oh, I would save myself, but no, you might not. You might just be too fear paralyzed by the time it happens. So
that is all true. Thank you for saying that. It was big. It was difficult. It was difficult, especially leaving my son. And as a father, you know what that means. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Turns out that it was the best thing they could do, because now my son is 21. He is studying in the University of Amsterdam anthropology, sociology. He actually just emailed me last night a paper he wrote they're doing on Central and South America. They're doing those cultures, and he wrote a paper on shamans, because in the meantime, as I continued to live, he grew up in an environment where shamans were in our house. Since he was 9, he was in sweat lodges with me and elder shamans. So it's become a bigger part. First of all, it's a great relationship, because we weren't physically together until he was, I want to say 10 or so. I was still striving to stay alive. I would visit him, but after that, we got together. We have an awesome friendship, an awesome relationship, and so happy. He was a big motivator for me to stay alive.
Exactly, and that's sometimes what we need in life, is we need the motivation. If we have nothing to come home to at the end of the day except ourselves, then there's less motivation. Like, what am I going to live for? My job? Please. But I mean, it's just the way it goes in this world. And you said you were working at Vogue?
I did. I think my claim to fame was Vogue covers in fashion magazines in Athens, Greece. So I was working with European magazines.
Oh,
did a lot of advertisement, bulletin boards, big ads, anything that was running on TV and movies was also in magazines. I would be doing the photography work of it. Looking back, I'm happy I did it, but I also know where it took wear and tear on me, and where, it's like, if you look at it as a career, it was a really successful career. I made a good name for myself. And every friend of mine was like, oh man, you're so lucky. It's so awesome what you do. But as I'm grateful for it and what it offered me for those 20 plus years that I worked in that space, I also see an emptiness in it, and that 2D, these magazines is just like, they're 2D, they're printed. And even though there was not much of Photoshop back then, still everything was kind of fake, and creating a non-reality that was, would make people want things,
all of us here in America that grew up in the 2000s, 90s had to watch that video in health class of how they actually prop up the McDonald's French fries with toothpicks and everything for commercials to make them look so appetizing. Like, we all saw that. We all know how the bread is made in a way. Like, and you were a photographer for Vogue in the 80s and 90s into the early 2000s. And I mean,
in the 90s and early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine having to do it now. Like how much worse it is now when you have to have things for online like every day. When those photographers now are probably going crazy with the amount of work they have to do.
I don't want to imagine it. I don't I don't want to even go there. It's just like it's a tough job. It was, and I'm sure it's the same thing. It's a real cutthroat, antagonistic job. You miss a day out of work or something, and you're gone. Like the next photographer, the next thing is up. So it's go go go. But again, I'm happy that I did it, and also it gave me a stark contrast of traveling and talking about the paranormal and the normal. There's so many ways to talk about this. I left all that normalcy, which is not natural, really. And it was what it was. I have no judgment towards it. But I was really happy to like find myself walking out either high up in the Andes or also traveled really deep into the jungles of Peru, close to the borders of Bolivia, and work with the Shipibo tribes. Where the Shipibo tribe people are people that really actually came to contact with white people in the 70s and the 80s. So even though I arrived in the year 2006 in that jungle, still a lot of these people, they hadn't seen many white people. I was lucky enough to somehow find my way all the way down to where I needed to get in a boat. And a lot of it was just traveling aimlessly and making sure that I was just catching on boats or buses that I would just get in a boat and see where it would take me. With that said, also, one of the things that surprised me, because as I left the Western world in search for shamans, I thought I was looking for something that was almost extinct and kind of like in the periphery, in the margins kind of thing, and that it would be really hard to where am I going to find these people that do this great work, men and women of power, of the extraordinary. And to my surprise, and especially, kind of 20 years later now, 17 years later, working very close to them and having many of these family, they're like family to me. I've raised my son. I've watched them raise their kids. We've eaten together. We've traveled together. They've changed who I am and my foundation. But to my surprise, when I arrived there, I realized more and more through especially the first 4, 5, 6 years, there was an aha that's like, wait a minute. Shamanism is not extinct, nor is it something rare. It's like anywhere you go in South America, Central and South America, anywhere you go in Africa, in places in Australia, definitely in China and in India, this is what you have. It's just like, you go to all these places in Peru or third world countries that don't have hospitals, period. They don't have a CVS, period. And even if there was a CVS or a doctor, most people on the planet, more than, I want to say, 50%, I'm just going to say at 50 to be safe, but I'm sure it's more than that. More than 50% of people on the planet do not have a single dollar to buy an aspirin at a CVS. And that's something we don't realize. We're in the Western world, we're in our comforts. Some of us feel we're poor, some of us feel we're rich, are poor or rich or whatever in that. We all have, though, and we have some access, besides what the pharmas are and the costs and all that, whole other topic, which the little you said, I agree with you totally. The thing is that we have some kind of access. And what we don't realize is that most of the people on the planet, more than 50% of the people on the planet, don't have access to doctors. And through, doctors as we know them are really what we know in the last 50 years, maybe 100. But before that, they were only trying to establish what medicine is. In the mid 1800s in Europe, but still, imagine a dentist in the 1800s in Europe. It's just like I'd rather go to a shaman.
I believe a dentist in the 1800s in America was just the same as going to a barber.
I think so.
The same person.
I think you're right. I think you're right at that. It's historic. That's a historic fact. Now that you say it, yes.
They'll give you a haircut and they'll rip a tooth out at the same time.
Yeah, since you're there, get the pliers. And the truth is, at the same time, is that the shamanism throughout the world, throughout the history of humanity, has been something that's been practiced for thousands of years. So again, it can be like doctors, or it can be like car mechanics. There's some that are good and some that are bad. Some that are, people tell me, is shamanism real? It's just like, well, what is real? Define it, first of all. And second of all, it's like anything, you go to a car mechanic and it could be a bad car mechanic. It's the same thing with a shaman. Same thing with a doctor. It's like,
Yep.
people have told me, especially just kind of bringing up when it was a fashion couple of years ago to talk about cultural appropriation, and I'm happy to speak to that if you want me to. But it's just like they're saying, are they real and are they genuine? And I'm like, or are they in for the money? And I said, would you happen to know any lawyers or any doctors that are in it for the money? Because I think most of them are in it for the money. Most of them are in it for the money. Where you meet a humble shaman in a village of Peru, and what you give him is a meal, you buy him a plate of food, and in my case, they gave me my life back. They literally gave me my life back. It was many meals, but it was meals. No one was in it to take my thousands of dollars, which I didn't have, but no one was in it in that sense to become rich. They live a life of medicine and of healing, because that's who they are. That's who they identify, what they identify with. That's their mission and purpose in life, is to serve and help other people move out of suffering, come out of dis-ease, and help them in any way possible, psychological, physiological, and even to their soul level.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny because your story kind of makes me think of Peter Parker. Just an average day photographer waiting for his abilities to come and be able to do something in the world. But it's kind of similar.
Oh, to send me a message with that. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that word.
Spider-Man.
Okay, all right. I haven't seen the last one. More grown up, so I'm not watching those things anymore. But
well, I mean, it's a story all this time in the comics. But yeah, I mean, but let's break down into what is shamanism for those who don't know. What would your definition of shamanism be?
Okay, well, again, just having spent I spend day in, day out with shamans, and all my life is about shamanism. So, it's one of the things I want to say is that I know a lot of people that have an opinion, and a lot of the opinions that I hear is like, I have like a wide variety of opinions, but a lot of people say it's like, oh, this woo stuff, and it's all these things that people are selling to Hollywood stars, etc. And that's by far not the reality. The reality is this, again, that I'll start from the beginning. The word itself, shaman, comes from the Tungusic language. It was a country in eastern Russia, and it means shaman means the knower, he or she who knows, that has knowledge. So what we look at when we're looking at humanity, and when we're looking at the evolution of humanity, and we go back to turning from Neanderthal to becoming Homo sapiens, and that moment in humanity where we receive the prefrontal cortex, this fourth brain that gives us logic, that gives us empathy, gives us intuition, that gives us love and caring for others. It's a whole new brain, right? Because before it was like whoever had the club and was biggest would, knock you down, take your food, take your woman, and walk away. Now we're becoming human, meaning that Neanderthal, meaning that compassion, it becomes a part of the process.
Exactly, and I mean, I agree. It's an ancient thing. It's been around forever. I mean, the Vikings had shamans. The cavemen for shamans. You're right, they did. I mean, it was something that was kind of lost when we became less illusioned with the magic of the world, and we wanted to focus more on the monetary value, and we wanted to focus more on politics and religion. All that, especially religion, that's where a lot of this stuff got lost, and that's when the world started to really lose its goodness. I would say it started to lose its goodness and became a little more evil.
I love it. I love how you're saying that, and it's true. And the thing is, how we lost it, right? It wasn't, I thought too, and I think many people think it was a part of an evolutionary part that we evolved and we became more technological, or we became more real, and now we know. And before then, we didn't know. We needed to rely on faith. So let's clarify this: that shamanism is not a religion. Shamanism and healing through shamanism does not require faith. It's not a placebo. I'm alive here not because of on placebo ideas, but because of specific practices, specific plant medicine, specific ceremonies that I did that helped me take care of tumors in my body. It was no woo-woo. No one was teaching me, and I didn't need to know or want to know anything about the chakras and how many petals and what colors. That I didn't care. When I was in Peru needing to find someone, I wanted to live. So I want to clarify this is really very real. And so shamans throughout the world differ depending on their lineage and the specific healer. Basically, shaman is the doctor until we named doctors and separated that. And depending on the lineage, they have different tools and different knowledge where they come from, different herbs they work with, different tools they work with, different ceremonies they work with. I just want to say just really quickly, when we forgot all this and we lost it and came to what is doctors and what is hospitals, what is pharma, and just because this could be a talk for hours or days by itself, but I want to say we just didn't forget it. We were made to forget it. There was 300, 500 years of persecution against magic. And I'll tell you this, in the 1700s, there was a great gathering of all the churches from the Protestants from England, from Spain, from Italy, from the Vatican. All the big church heads got together. I want to say it's 1700, 1740. Please fact check me. I'm not sure about the date, but really close to that. Now, they got together and they voted on two questions. Do women and do animals have souls? This is yesterday. I mean, Jeremy, this is like 1700s. This is like less than 300 years ago. This is yesterday. I mean, my grandfather lived to 105, so it's like 3 grandfathers ago. It's like preposterous. It's ridiculous. And it shows the littleness, the smallness, the fear-driven. And basically, so these 3 things, women, animals, and magic were persecuted. And what do I find? I come across these shamans, the Keros Nation people, that believe, first of all, in the feminine. Mother Earth, Pachamama, gives birth to all things. From her clay, from the carbon, from the all the water she makes, she gives us this, and we can create a flesh, and we're actually born from her. So the first thing that these shamans are, the Keros are, is feminists. They love the feminine. They bow to women. They bow to their wives, their cousins, their sisters, to everyone as a woman, because women are the ones that give nourishment, they give kindness, they give everything that we need to be, first of all, born, and second of all, be alive. The second thing I realized that these guys knew and started teaching me immediately, which was really, really important, talking about my endocrine identity. I noticed that because our endocrine system, our hormonal system, has everything to do with our health and our perception of reality. So they started teaching me about animals. I got to pause here, and then they started teaching me about magic too. But I want to pause here and say the Kero people, just to be more specific with this, one of the tribes that I work and I'm really closely related to, and the Jaguar path brings many tools directly from them. They guide me, they help me in the teachings, etc. Is that when the conquistadors arrived, the Spanish Inquisition, these same people that were driving the same churches came to South America to bring upon them this other reality. When the Keros saw the conquistadors, they said they knew what was going to happen, and they left. Now, the Keros are the Inca healers, the healers of the Incas at the time. So when they saw what was happening, they went up to 16 to 18,000 feet and hid for 500 years. Don Francisco, my teacher, came out of the 18,000 feet, and at age 30, it was the first time he saw electricity and cars and saw what had happened. They still lived and still live up in the mountain there, as we have on the planet for all of millennia. They live with stone houses, with the little wood they could get at that altitude, with potatoes and whatever the llama and they can get out of the llama fat, the llama fur, basic life. So basically what they did is hid, and they were not influenced by this persecution of the feminine, the animals, and the magic. And they preserved it. They preserved it in a language that is, first of all, ancient and amazing, Quechua, the Quechua language. And here's where we can talk a lot about reality and what's normal and what's paranormal. It's like language defines who we are. Like, every time I wake up, or now we're talking, it's like, our language, we define who we are and understand the world, right? We have a language that within it, even English, was persecuted, that the feminine, the animals, and the magic were persecuted, which means that they were persecuted in our language and how we talk about these things. When I have all these people, and I meet a lot of people that come in our training, are psychotherapists, they're doctors, maybe yoga teachers, massage therapists, but we also have a lot of scientists, and it's really funny because they all come and laugh at themselves, because by the time they come, they've heard me enough, or we had some exchange that they know that we're talking about something that's really real and really grounded. But a lot of the people will automatically say, well, this is woo-woo stuff that is not real and not true, and it's trickstery. And that idea remains from the fact that magic, in this sense, was persecuted for so many years. So we've marginalized it, and we're made not to believe in it. We're made to automatically think, oh, he's a fake. One of those fake shamans that work with... It's poor examples, and very limited perception is unfortunately what really is the norm around the world. I've opened my eyes, and I keep on opening my eyes more and more and more. The more years I work with them, being there, and I've liberated myself in so many ways, and realizing that. And the more I learn some Sanskrit from the yogic lineage and some Quechua, the more I've learned words that honor the feminine, that honor magic, that tell us how animals can teach us things. It basically more and more makes you more real and more grounded, because we live a life that is a result of the dark ages, where someone came along and said, man, not woman, man is the favorite creation of God. And somehow someone decided that God said that, or somehow decided that that's a fact. It's like, well, wait a minute. Was it a white man that actually said that? It's like, I am God's favorite creation. Thus, I can destroy the planet, use animals, use women, and make fun of magic. And basically, this is the era we live in, an era that for hundreds of years, we have not honored the feminine. We have not had a connection. Like, we've lost our connection with the wild. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've always loved, like, you see a documentary of animals. Mm-hmm. I get intrigued. I've lived in places. I lived for 3 years, just until 8 months ago. I was living for 3 years in Costa Rica. Every time I would come across an animal, maybe a jaguar, a monkey, a possum, whatever it was, I was just so thrilled, because we're relatives. It awakens something in us. And basically what we did is we domesticated the wolves into dogs, the jaguars into cats, the wild buffalo into cow. And what we didn't realize is we domesticated ourselves in the whole process. And
we did.
Like the cow is not a wild bison, like a dog, which are sweet, it's not a wild wolf. We've become this sweeter thing that has no bigger awareness of its instinct, no bigger awareness of the environment around it, and we've weakened ourselves in so many ways, as we have with the animals we've domesticated.
Well, a lot to say about all that. I do 100% agree with everything you just said. Personally, I do. I'm like you. I do love animal documentaries. They do inspire me with awe when I do watch them. As rare as that is nowadays, because I have to watch a lot of other things for podcasts and I don't have time. But I've always been a person that loved going to zoos, because it's the closest I can get to seeing these animals in their natural, and I use that word very unwillingly in this circumstance, but in their natural territory. Because I am not going to be able, I would never be able to go to I'll probably never be able to afford to go to Africa and see lions in the savannas and watch them. I mean, I wouldn't want to get that close anyway, but I would never get a chance to go watch them like in their natural habitat. I have to watch them in this cage where they try to make a fake natural habitat to the best of their ability. Which, I mean, it's still enjoyable, but it also just makes you sad that these monkeys have to live in cages.
But you've had that feeling. You have that feeling of like excitement when you see the animal, and I mean, it's really deep inside us. It really awakens where we come from.
Exactly.
And and again, having lived 3 years in Costa Rica, which is wild habitat, is really like mountain lions and different kinds of cats and like a lot of wildlife. And and you're mentioning of Africa. I haven't been, but if you look at now people that go to do these photography safaris,
Yeah.
you're sitting next to the lions and the cheetahs. This whole thing about the wild being very aggressive and be dangerous for the humanity comes from the same white, weak, fearful people that created a story. Sure, a lion can eat you, but most likely it won't. It's still like a part of like I've seen it. I've been very close to animals. They have no interest in attacking you. I've been, especially in the water in Costa Rica, being close to sharks and big and whales and all this. It's like most animals do not care to attack human beings. They're curious. They look at you, they'll leave. And we're still living with a fear because we've been weakened to that place. We've been domesticated to that place to be fearful creatures. So if we're fearful, what do? We abide to the system, right? We say yes to everything they're telling us so we can be safe.
Exactly.
Yet there's not much truth in it. And if there is truth. A crocodile won't think twice about it. He will attack you. He will eat you. There is danger. But the way we've domesticated ourselves and killed away everything, there's no single, there's 10 animals in the whole of Europe and 25 in the whole United States. The way we've cleared out, what's happened is we've moved away from nature, with the result being is that we moved away from our own nature. We don't know our nature anymore. And when you look at all these diseases, cancers or anxiety and stress related diseases, which are many, they're all, the foundation is the fact that we have moved away from our own nature. If you come back to know your nature and you begin to come back to living more naturally, a lot of disease and a lot of stress and anxiety moves away automatically. You turn into another channel. You change your hormonal reality. And as you change your hormones, the function of your internal organs changes, the nervous system, your motor system, and your whole perception of reality begins to change. And in essence, what happens, to my experience, you become more real. And for me, it's just I'm not a wilderness guide, but I've lived close enough in the jungles of Peru, in the jungles of Costa Rica. I've been in closer proximity in wildlife, exposed and very close to feel the fear, but also to overcome it and realize that, wait, they have another relationship here. More animals are interested to share affection and exchange of curiosity than anything else, really. But coming back to the shamanism as a whole, once you become more real, then you begin to tap into places of your brain that you're allowed to open more, your pineal gland, your pituitary gland, that allows you to start exploring different frequencies of reality. Because if you're in the space of fear, your amygdala, which is this gland in the back of our brain, is turned on. And in turn, your amygdala signals to your adrenals that there is danger and you're in fight or flight or freeze. And when you're in that state, you're not accessing not even 1% of your capacity of thinking. Because if a lion is truly chasing you, you need all the power that you have, all your blood circulation to be at your limbs, to run faster, to save yourself. You don't need to be thinking philosophy or thinking other frequencies. You need to be thinking, I need to save my life. But what happens is that we're living in this fight or flight or freeze with our adrenals turned on because they make sure we're constantly afraid by what's on the news.
Yep.
And as we can't turn on, once you start turning off your amygdala, what happens is your pituitary gland turns on, and more electricity and more blood comes into your heart and connects this front part of yourself. And that's where you begin to open. People say, can you see energies? It's like, when you reach this place of understanding other frequencies, you're like, everyone can see energies. If you'd step a moment out of your fear and your domestication, you realize that we as human beings are designed to have empathy and intuition, to understand where something might happen tomorrow, to understand what's going to happen in a month. We have that ability. We have the capacity. We physically have that capacity. right? If we're allowed to move into the prefrontal cortex, to awaken the pituitary gland, and then through the pituitary gland begin to understand and open our whole perception to, again, other frequencies that most people locked in fear cannot.
Exactly. And this is exactly what I talk about with a lot of my guests in the spiritual side of things, and there has been a spiritual awakening that has started across the world. More and more people are awakening this part of their brain, this part of their body, where they are open to the idea that there may be other planes, other dimensions that we are just living beside or even crossing over with at times, whether it be spirits coming through or whether it's even cryptids such as Bigfoot and Dogmen. Who knows? I mean, there's these other planes that we live in constant harmony with, and we have to maintain the balance.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just one thing is that when we go to sleep, our pituitary gland opens and lightens up and secretes dimethyltryptamine and melatonin. So melatonin puts the body to sleep, the physical part, but dimethyltryptamine, DMT, takes the brain and starts bringing it onto other realms. And I'm going to ask you or any of our audience is like, where do you think you go when you're dreaming? When you have this really vivid dream and you're like, oh my God, I woke up and I was somewhere in the Middle East and I could see these people, they're doing things, or I could see like it was a nail on the wall and I could see a painting, I could see in detail places, something and of a place that I've never seen before. It's like, how do you think you get to see that? Is you think that it's your imagination. In essence, the shamans tell us, no, we do travel. We travel out of our body and we can tap into the frequency of other people that are awake on the other side of the planet and through them see things.
Astral projection is a very real thing. I've had people who can do it on the show. It's a very lucid dreaming as well. It's a very real thing. And premonitions. I've had premonitions in my dreams since I was a child. It's never anything vital to life. It's always conversations that don't matter in one lick, but it's stuff that's going to happen. It's events. I mean, none of it ever is something it's not like the movies where I know it's going to happen. I could stop it or I could change it. It's just going to happen. And then I'll be like, oh yeah, I dreamt about this weeks ago.
Yeah. I knew that.
It's just that type of thing. I mean, the dream world is a whole nother world that can be explored if you put the practice into doing it. Lucid dreaming is very, very real. And so is astral projection. I know people that can do it. And I've heard stories in this show of people that can do it in the different planes they've gone to. Some of them are intimidating and places that should be feared, and some of them are great places where you feel nothing but a euphoria. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's different places to go. There's different planes. It's 100% true.
It's just about being trained, right? It's about having the education, the specific education to cultivate the specific tools. And for me, having survived cancer, at some point, about 5 years into my apprenticeship, my teacher started saying, you need to start teaching this now. And I'm like, well, I'm a white guy. I mean, how am I going to teach this? And he said, you teach this in English. And of course, it wasn't me translating the Quechua in the Spanish. It was a lot more than that. To teach it so we can understand in the Western world. And because I was there to survive, to live, to overcome cancer, I learned tools that were very specific to healing and very specific to changing who I was and understanding who I was, understanding more of my nature, understanding what I needed to do. And when they started pushing me to teach as my next level of apprenticeship with them, because at some point he says, he said, that's your PhD in shamanism. You start teaching it and then you begin to learn more. By teaching, you learn so much more. So
the student becomes a master.
Actually, absolutely, right? And you're always a student, and that never changes. You're always a student. And then I'm sitting here with hundreds of students who, at the years, have lasted more than a decade now, thousands, I'm going to say, that passed through my classes and through my trainings. What I brought from Peru, and I named the Jaguar path, is a path of specific tools that I train people to help them be able to let go of, like one of the tools we call cord cutting. So many people suffer from a breakup or a divorce, and then for years or decades are suffering from it. And I can teach cord cutting, and we cut the cords. And it's like he was saying, I'm not going to heal you from your divorce, but I'll teach you cord cutting. You cut the cord, you become the shaman, and you discover it's like, oh, that relationship isn't pulling on me anymore. It's not pushing. It's not making me feel angry or animosity 10 years later. And anger and animosity is an acidic state that I'm living in, that my liver is living in, my kidneys are living in, right? So once you start clearing that out, or we have chakra illumination, clearing out a trauma that we have from the past and taking it out from one of our specific glands. Because if you have a trauma, we think we have a story, but the trauma, and why people will say, like, if I mention the story of a trauma, someone starts crying, right? Because they remember it. It hurts them. The crying itself, and I have a story on that, is a physical, it's showing you how the trauma is actually physical and not mental. I have the story, it makes me sad, it makes me angry, it makes me whatever, it paralyzes me, whatever it does. But where the trauma really is in my body. And that's why I will have a physical response to bringing it up. So we have techniques. One of the techniques, again, that I've learned and I share in the Jaguar Path training is chakra illumination. I take out that shadow. We take out that shadow from the chakra, from the specific gland. To be specific, when I'm talking about chakras, I'm talking about glands. Everything I talk about is based on the physical body, because that's what we live in and that's what we experience. And once you remove that trauma out, your whole rest of the body and your hormones change and your reality. Then you bring up the trauma and you're like, yeah, it's like, maybe you had like a light trauma when you're a child, like, oh, I was 9 years old and I was in love with a girl in the desk next to me, but they left. And then for a few days I cried. But now looking back at it, I laugh at it and say, oh, that's so sweet. It's like, you can come to laughing and saying, oh, that's so sweet, about many traumas that people have been working for decades to solve. The shamanic work I call accelerated healing, because it has tools. And one of the great masters of the previous century, Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, he learned shamanic work, and he brought a lot of shamanic work in his table, literally in his table, and literally in his methods, because they're advanced psychological techniques. They're not. They're very physical, they're psychological, and they're very real. They're not based on anything woo-woo or wannabe, but basically they're based on knowledge that's taken thousands of years for humans to cultivate, and for father to son, for these shamans to learn, to know. And sometimes that exception on taking someone out of the tribe, like they took me, and they said, okay, let's see what we could do with you. Let's see how we can cure your whiteness, if that's okay for me to say.
Of course
Now,
it is.
The story I had, the second shaman I was in front, and I'll give you space for any questions you may have, and you might think more particular to your audience. But the other shaman I had, when I left, I started working with Don Francisco in the Andes, and then I went down into the jungle, into the Shipibo tribe people. And here I am now. I don't know how the hell I've arrived there. I'm close to what they've told me. We're close to the borders of Bolivia. We're in deep jungle. It's like, if they would leave me alone, I would definitely die. There was no way for me to find my way out of there or find a way to survive. But I'm there, and I'm now again on my knees, and I'm crying, and I tell the shaman, who is an ayahuasquero. He is a shaman that leads with ayahuasca ceremonies and healing with plant medicine. I'm crying, and I said, please save me. I have my son. He's going to die. And he looked down at me and he said, you know what? I don't care about my own emotions. What makes you think I'm going to care about your emotions? So I was like taken aback. I was like, so what is this? Oh my God, I'm in the wrong place. This is not a shaman. He's not a healer. He's not compassionate. He's not feeling sorry for me. I kind of got up. I wiped my tears off my face, and I don't know what I was ready to say. I was ready to say, I'm getting the hell out of here. But as I got up and I took a big inhale and kind of like took up more space to because I felt that I was like just blown his cover. Like he blew his cover, and that I needed to get out of here. So when I got back into my power, he turned around to me before I even had time to say. I just took an inhale. I was like, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, well, now you look more ready to do this. Let's do this work. He took me and he made a change in my life that since that second, and talking about accelerated healing, it was a second that I realized something I never knew about my emotions, that I own my emotions. Till then, my emotions owned me. Even though it was a difficult story. Yes, I was dying. Yes, I was told I was dying. Yes, it was a difficult story. It wasn't a fake drama. It was a drama. Still, the fact that I was falling in the drama, being a victim of all this, crying, and I cried a lot for many months because I felt it was the end of my life. I realized that was not helping me. I was creating an acidic environment in my whole body which was only worsening the cancer. Once he got me out to buying my emotions and buying into them, I'd rather saying choosing when I want to have what emotion, what are the feelings that I want to bring up in every moment. And I got out of the grip of hormones that had the grip on me. I started regulating my hormones, my chemistry. I started regulating the tumors. I started regulating my reality. And again, of course, my perception of the world.
Exactly.
So
And it's as with everything in the paranormal world, it's about changing your mindset. It's about opening yourself up to more of what's out there. I mean, you mentioned animals, and I'm sure that the shamans in Peru, like all the other metaphysical people around the world, they probably worship these animals and use their powers when they can.
absolutely.
Borrow their powers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And here is just like I just catch the similarity. They worship not in the sense that they believe in something so much bigger than them and they're small, but they understand that we're sharing this planet, and that there's things that wolves know that we don't know. There's things that jaguars know, the things that condors know. It's like the jaguar, for example, they taught me, teaches us, and why this is called the Jaguar path, why my school is Jaguar path, is like because the Jaguar path teaches us no fear in this world or the next. Jaguar is on the top of the food chain. There's nothing coming after it. So it teaches a way of like, can you imagine that you could walk through your whole life and not even have a hint of the emotion of fear come close to you? Can you imagine how different your life would be? If everything you'd thought, you dreamed of, you just go for it. Like when a jaguar pounces, it's 100 million% locked into its prey. It has no doubt. It has no doubt, no fear, no kind of what if. There's no ifs or buts. It acts. And that's why you can make 9 killings out of 10, where the other big cats make 3 killings out of 10. The jaguar is like on the top of the food chain. It teaches us how to move without fear. And then you start taking that and say, well, okay, I can start discerning between the difference between fear and the difference between danger. I become aware of danger of something, and I'm more careful, and I walk carefully, not fearfully. Because if I work fearfully, I'm not seeing things. There's a lot of things I'm not seeing. I'm walking with something that's overshadowing me. The serpent teaches us how to shed our skin and let go of the past. The serpent says, wait, you have some childhood trauma. I have had some difficulties. I've come from a very poor family. We had some difficulties. I grew up in dirt roads in Athens before Athens was what it is today. In dirt roads in this refugee neighborhood from where my grandma came from Western Turkey when they were pushed out in 1912. So I've had my share of trauma, fair share of trauma. The serpent taught me that you know what, you can let it go. Yeah, you can have this idea that this happened to me, and you can shed that. You can let it go. So we have all these techniques of shedding trauma and releasing them. And furthermore, because someone can be listening now and say, yeah, well, Ray, you don't know my story. You don't know how deep my trauma is. I can never overcome it. And you're saying all this, but it's not true. It is true. It is true, because I'll tell you what. For anyone that's had trauma, that's listening to us, it is the shamans say this: we are the wounded healers. The shamans say, if you've had trauma in your life, you can use this to find power. This trauma has helped you deepen your humanity, has helped you deepen your compassion, and is a motivation to learn techniques to heal and then to heal others. If you haven't had trauma, most likely you grew up in New York and you grew up with a rich dad getting your Porsche at 16 and a Ferrari at 20, and you have zero traumas. All you are is a surface, arrogant prick, excuse my English. But if you've had trauma, you say, okay, my brother, my sister, who someone's crying, comes to my office, or I'm working with them online, and I see their pain. I was on my knees crying. I know where they are. I've had the trauma. So I could say, my brother, my sister, here's my hand. Here's my hand. I have these 5 steps and these 5 tools that we can use, or you can learn at the school. You can become the shaman and heal yourself. And then you turn around, and I look at cancer, and you said earlier, and thank you for that. You said, I'm sorry for everything you've gone through. And I appreciate you said that. I look back, and I'm more appreciative of the cancer and those first 2 years of being lost in Mexico and in Peru, in the jungles and the mountains, and just so difficult. I'm more appreciative of that than my career in Vogue. I mean, I'm partially ashamed for my career in Vogue because, people are like, oh, you drove fancy cars and you were the supermodels. supermodels that look like these fantastic women on the magazine, they're 17-year-old anorexic girls that eat pizza and then throw it up before the shoot. There's nothing real about it or anything that has depth or essence. That's why I say it's two-dimensional. It's like an image that is not real. Where I became real when I had to tread through the jungle. I became real when I broke down, and there was no lie I could say to anyone anymore. I was dying, and that makes you real. And in that sense, shamanism is very real. And the magic and the power we have in our own chemistry and electricity is very, very real. We just have to get out of our own way and expand our knowledge. And it's about studying and learning. It's not about believing. I say never believe at first sight. Be a skeptic. Question everyone. I did. Every shaman I met, I questioned. And it could be like I met 100, but I'm working with these specific 5. And there's 10 of them that were wannabes. Okay. They were wannabes. That doesn't make all of shamanism fake or wannabe. There was 10 of them, like 10% of doctors or car mechanics or, or plumbers. They're not good. They're 10% are meh, they're wannabes. But again, the reality of shamanism and stepping out of normal to your full potential and your full power as a human being, where you can be a shaman. We all are shamans. It lies in the fact of becoming real and studying it rather than having a Facebook opinion on it, right? Because most people have some Facebook opinion and they throw it out and they throw a hate or they throw a whatever it is, but without having knowledge of it. So again, for me, my studies with these men and women in Peru are essential, how they changed my point of view of life and how I've expanded to the place where I could see more, so much more, that it actually helped me to survive, to change my chemistry and change the reality of tumors that are no more.
Which right there, and I would say though, those kids you're talking about that grew up in New York and were rich and handed Porsches at 16, they did go through trauma. It's just they don't recognize the trauma because they don't think they have it, but they did go through trauma because that's its own kind of trauma. When you don't have any kind of real life experience, that's its own trauma.
They did, and unfortunately, they're then just passing it down through the next generations and living a very limited life.
Yes, I agree 100%, but it is a form of trauma, even if they don't recognize it as such.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Absolutely. Because for every Porsche, there was a lack of a hug and a walk in a park with a dad. Rather, here's your Porsche, but I'm too busy, I'm working. Here's a Rolex, but I'm too busy, I'm working. It's like, none of that fulfills the heart, or Vogue magazines or expensive cars. None of those things fulfill the heart and what we are truly. Is like walking or running and playing with a dog, or having a cat purr with you, and as being in that real place of like, oh, now I'm feeling my mammalian true self, and I'm also going into a deeper place of what I am and what my nature is.
Exactly. It's the same. It's the same thing. Kids these days, all they want to do is play games, video games, or play on their computer or watch YouTube. They're missing out on the experience of being a kid, of the eye-opening experiences of a kid where you learn things. Kids today aren't walking through nature, just coming across different animals and learning how to deal with it. They're not learning how to find themselves if they get lost somewhere and they have to get home. Like, these are skills that people need to learn. They're more physical skills even, but there's mental skills in there as well that people need to learn, and they're not learning it nowadays.
These are the skills that we all need to know now, to learn now more than ever. We're headed to wherever we're headed. Things are happening and have been happening the last few years. This is a time for each one of us to awaken the shaman within. We teach with, I say we, my wife and I teach the Jaguar path. The shamans also visit us in several of the sessions. We do a 9-month training. We are actually starting November 18th, 19th as our first weekend, and we go through June. 1 weekend a month, 9 months of gestation. If you want to learn more, just a plug to also share with people, jaguarpath.com. You can see more of the curriculum. You can see who we are, what we do, and what establishments and schools throughout the world we've taught, because we teach and we present our work through the biggest of all the, from Yoga Journal Conference to New York Open Center to Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, to basically big retreat centers around the world that are there as hubs for spirituality and for reality to be taught and to be learned. So um, share this with you, and I'd be happy to see you, Jeremy, personally in it. We'll just talk some more, but you can see more of that information on jaguarpath.com. It's a real training where we work with a foundation of, first of all, acceptance, second of all, admiration, and affection for every single person that's in the group. And we get together, and we have, last year, now that we've gone online the last 3 years because of COVID, last year we had people from 9 different countries. We had a group of 60 people. We had healers, we had doctors, psychotherapists, chemists. We actually had someone that works with the space program in NASA, and
Nice.
we have Reiki people, we have yogis, yoga teachers, massage therapists, people that are looking for healing or healers. And for everyone, this school gives an equal opportunity, because wherever you walk in, you walk out, all hands up. All the testimonials we get is that everyone comes up 10 notches further up. 10 notches, and an awakening in reality. You can either learn to become a shaman, or a lot for the psychotherapists we work with, we open their hands. We come into a place where we say, when a client calls you, you already know from their voice what they're dealing with. They open the door and they walk into your office. You see exactly what you need to do, because, and there's no magic here. I mean, magic is everywhere, and there's mechanisms in magic. When you see a person walking, a shaman isn't using invisible eyes or seeing they can see other frequencies too. But more importantly, what you're seeing is how the person is walking, what their body language is saying. The motor system is giving you 100 points, tips on what's happening in the psychology of a person. The way a person walks or moves their hands or where they place their eyes is already telling you what's happening to the motor system. In other words, the endocrine system. In other words, where they're holding the trauma and why and how long. And you can see this, and we talk about it when I was working with Don Manuel, and I said to him, teach me how to see energy. He said, okay, are you ready? Are you ready? And it was really funny, because I would go down every year and he'd teach me different things. And he'd say, okay, now we're going up in the Andes. Now we're going to the jungle. We get into buses, airplanes, whatever. So I met him at Cusco and I said, I want you to teach me how to see energy. You're not escaping me now. I was comfortable enough 4 or 5 years in my apprenticeship to say this and to insist. And I said, so where are we going to go? I'm paying the tickets, airplane tickets, anything. Where are we going? He said, let's go to, we're in Cusco. I said, let's go to a Cafe Cappuccino right around the corner. And I'm like, what? And he sat me down and he said, seeing energy. He says, are you ready for the download? And this is a free class, part of it at least, for everyone listening. And I said, I was like this. He said, stop dismissing the apparent. Stop dismissing the apparent. And that is a really simple statement and is huge on what that means. But every person's trauma is apparent when I'm sitting and talking to someone. I can see really clearly several things that are happening. And I may or may not be able to say, oh, that would happen when you're 7 or 9. Sometimes I can, it's really close, but it doesn't matter. I can see what it is, and we can move through specific tools that can reverse that. And again, from where it was a trauma and it was holding you back, it can be your golden nugget and all your richness, because now you have the compassion from it, the power from it, the knowledge that you healed yourself from it, and you rise above it. And from being a victim, you become a healer.
Exactly. Take what was used against you and turn around and use it for other people to help them. That's
absolutely
the most selfless thing you can do in this world.
100%. And the more selfless you are, the more real you become.
Exactly. I mean, I used to be one of those people when I was younger who only cared about myself, and that's the way I lived. I cared about myself, and it showed. It very easily showed. And eventually I just realized this isn't working. What I'm doing in life is not working. I have few to zero friends. I have no relationships because I am too much of an asshole. So I had to look inside myself and be like, all right, time to change. Time to be selfless, which, trust me, you become selfless at first, people are going to take advantage of it because that's the way people are. But you find the good people once you do that and lock onto those people, and then you stop getting taken advantage of, and it's a good thing. And selflessness becomes a great thing to have because you can help other people sometimes without even costing you a dime. It's just an ear or a hand,
Absolutely.
or an arm. Like give them a hug, or hold their hand if they need a handheld, or talk to them if they need someone to talk to. That's just being selfless. You're giving your time to them. That's all they
Absolutely.
need.
Absolutely.
Well, I got one more question that I have to ask because this is a paranormal show. But then after that, we can wrap it up. But because Peru, I'm not even going to get into all the different things I've heard of Peru in the paranormal field, but do the people, since you were basically with a tribe that seclude themselves from main civilization for so long, do they have any legends or tales of creatures up there that mankind doesn't really know exist?
Well, there's a lot. This is an interesting subject. It's like, okay, a lot of what is known in Peru, and some of my teachers. So I have teachers from 3 different lineages. So I'm going to say about my teacher of one lineage, a curandero, spent a lot of time on Lake Titicaca, and he mentioned a lot about UFO sightings. Lake Titicaca is at 16,000 feet and is known to be a base where a lot of UFOs come in and out.
Yes, it is.
At that moment, I didn't want to know anything about it. All I needed to know about is like, how can I cure myself and how can I heal myself? And I did spend the next few years really only focusing on that physicality. So to be honest, it's not that I didn't pay attention to it. I never focused on that. And I'm sorry, don't have stories to say. I have come to a place that I can believe anything. And I'm sure that we're not the only ones in this great wide universe, and there's so much more traffic here than meets the eye.
Well, let me tell you this. There's a story from Peru that I am quite fond of because it involves the idea of living dinosaurs, which that's one of my favorite topics in the paranormal. And there are tales from Peru, from tribes in Peru, of these velociraptor-like creatures that live in a jungle, and the tribes around these jungles worship these creatures. They worship them. They fear them, but they worship them. I don't know if you actually came across that possibly. I know Peru's a big place. There's a lot of different tribes.
I did not, but I can believe it because the jungle is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like living in Costa Rica and in Peru, the jungles are still very much like the Jurassic Park era. There's ancient things there still alive because like some of the tribes never came in touch with white destruction. Some of these animals, I'm sure, are alive and thriving because they have not come across white destruction.
Of course. I mean, that's the theory. Because, I mean, there are some examples of these creatures in America, but it's few and far between. But in Africa and South America, there are plenty because there are plenty of spaces there that have not yet been destroyed by white men, mainly. I mean, I don't want to put all the blame on white men, but yeah, we get a lot of blame and we're supposed to. So deal with it. But that's the way I put it.
That's the truth of the matter. That's who destroyed everyone, is destroying everything. That's the truth of the matter. It's not a political statement. It's just a fact.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
historical fact. Like, unfortunately.
I mean, yes. Men in the Middle East that were not exactly white men did the same thing back in those days. They tried to go out in the world and colonize places. They didn't do it as successfully as all the white nations did because they didn't have the financial backings for ships and all that. But they tried, and I mean, there were Middle Eastern pirates, there were Asian pirates, and all these explorers.
There still are, actually.
Oh no, there is.
Out there. And maybe if the white men didn't take over, some other men would take over. We don't know. That's true.
I mean, history could have gone a lot of different ways, but it played out the way it did, and we'll accept the blame for it because we have to. But other than that, I mean, what an amazing story we've heard today, folks. I mean, you barely heard me speak today, but you know what? These are the episodes I prefer because, as I've said before, these shows are about the guest. They're not about me. No one wants to hear me talk about Bigfoot for 2 hours. Nobody. I don't want to hear me talk about Bigfoot for 2 hours. God, talk about boring. But hearing these amazing tales of people who have been all over the world to learn these ancient crafts, it's like almost watching a movie because they do make movies about this type of stuff nowadays, and they try to put more fantasy into it, but there's a reality to it too, and it really exists, and it's based on people like Ray here who have done these amazing, miraculous journeys to discover things to help themselves or things to help others. And I truly invite everybody to go check out the Jaguar Path. It's definitely interesting, and I definitely will be looking into it more than I already have, even though I definitely was checking out the website yesterday. I was very excited about this episode. But he told you where you can find him, folks. I'll have his link in the description as well, of course. And you all know where you can find me. If you don't, shame. But you can check out the outro if you really don't know, or if you're new. If you're new, go back about 180 episodes and listen. Thank you. And like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. And I want to thank Ray for coming on. It's been an amazing episode.
Jeremy, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to two more and continuing our conversation off the mic also.
Well, I look forward to that as well. And listeners, that's where we leave you. Have a good weekend, and I will see you all, I believe, tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Maybe Monday or Tuesday. I'll see you then. Have a good one.
You can find me on Facebook as Jeremy Bryant, or you can find me as Uncensored, Unapologetic, and Untamed UQ Podcast Collective Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter and the Instagram as @JugglerBastard, or should I say X now. And you can find me on TikTok as @JugglerBastard Podcast. You can also find me on YouTube as Paranormal the New Normal. And you can also find me streaming on YouTube as Blind Knowledge Network, because all knowledge is blind until they admit Bigfoot exists.